the best of the week on Relevant Radio.
Topic near and dear to my heart. And whether you're a woman or a man, it should be on yours too. Whether you are single or married, whether you are a parent or no children, is happiness. Specifically, female happiness. Now, today the topic is, why are we breeding unhappy women? Why? Why do you think women are unhappy? I'm going to clue you in on a little secret here. There was an intentional and coordinated effort to prey upon the happiness of women, to destroy and undermine women being happy. Factually speaking, 60 years ago, women were far more happy and satisfied than they are today. More people were married, more people had children. A lot of things were different. Fewer women worked. I'm not saying that you have to have children, you have to be married, and you shouldn't work in order to be happy, but just things that are out there, if you look at it, factually really go against the narrative. And all the studies show women were far happier 60 years ago. It's the paradox of so-called female happiness, because today women are so quote unquote free, liberated from fertility via contraception and abortion, liberated being stuck in a quote unquote unhappy marriage because of no fault divorce. And we could go on and on. But why are women so unhappy? Well, I would argue two particular things. One, we're dancing to a mantra, I can do anything, you can do better. And we're saying that to men. I can do anything, you can do better. And second, there's this pity party and demeaning attitude toward men. As if they can't do anything. They can't clean, they can't pay a bill, he can't watch his own children alone. This is one that really gets under my skin. The number of wives who truly think and believe and own the idea that their husband cannot watch the children alone. And okay, throw it back, Timmerie, they really can't. Have you ever let them try? Have you ever let them struggle? And who is it for you to say, let them, right? Like this idea of like letting your spouse, like he's the father of the children. Let him navigate it. He'll do it radically different. But the bottom line is this, because that's a whole nother nutshell in and of itself. Why are women so unhappy? One, we're dancing to the tune, I can do anything, you can do better. And we're saying it to men, we're thinking it, and we are functioning in that way. Number two, there's this pity party and demeaning attitude that men really can't accomplish or do anything. This lowly attitude of men. I look at modern shows today. Why is it that a lot of shows that do well often have stronger male characters? We're sick of this gender neutrality and this idea that women are always the hero or are always better. Why is it that we think men are so incapable? Why do we think that we have to prove ourselves as women to try and prove we can do everything better? The answer is this. The feminist strategy, which, by the way, is completely fueled by and is rooted in a communist strategy, is to undermine female happiness. The goal was, especially during second wave feminism and even long before that, was to drive a wedge between husband and wife. And now it's been driven so far, it's been driven between men and women before they could even consider marriage. There's a real problem in what's been fueled is this problem for women of what I'd like to call a spirit of perpetual dissatisfaction. It's been bred in women. We're always dissatisfied. It's not only this idea that is very human-centric, that I won't be happy until I get married. I won't be happy till I have a child. I won't be happy until I get that job. I won't be happy until I'm making this dollar amount. I won't be happy till I have this car, this vacation, this house. All of this idea that I won't be happy until this. But it's not just that type of dissatisfaction that is very human-centered, that is truly, in many respects, a spirit that is contrary to the peace, joy, and detachment we're meant to have as people of faith. But the spirit of dissatisfaction is that we're dissatisfied in any state we're in, especially when it comes to male-female interactions. This idea that we're oppressed, that we are the victim. Modern psychology today of how women have been bred for really the last 60 years is the idea is that women are always the victims in society and men are always the aggressors, the people who are hurting and suppressing. But here's what's fascinating. I recently learned a phrase called consciousness raising. Consciousness raising. I was introduced to it by Dr. Carrie Grass when I was reading her book, The End of Woman. And consciousness raising is what's been done for the last 60 years and far beyond. It just really took into very much so a group way of thinking, especially among women in the 60s during the second wave feminism. But consciousness raising has been part of the communist, socialist, Marxist ideology for some time. Now, I was reading a clipping from a paper called Lucifer. It is a paper from 1897, so by far predating even second and even first wave feminism, as we look at it from history. And this is what the paper discussed, how feminism, Marxism, all of it strove to, quote, preach the gospel of discontent to women, to mothers, and prospective mothers of the human race. Did you get that? To preach the gospel of discontent. This idea that you are perpetually discontent. It promoted the idea that women have been enslaved and demeaned. And fundamentally, that needed to change. And part of that had to do with our fertility, fundamentally. And part of that had to do fundamentally with detaching from dependence or protection or leadership or provisions of a man. Whether that's a father, whether that is spouse. It promoted the idea that women have been enslaved and demeaned. Now, Phyllis Chesler is a writer, psychologist. She's a professor of psychology and women's studies, and she is a product of second wave feminism. And she really memorializes the faces of second wave feminism, chronicling them and their stories. And she speaks quite a bit about consciousness raising and how consciousness raising groups were a part of second wave feminism. That essentially what would happen is that groups of women, and about 7 to 10 of them, would come together, and this was an intentional strategy with this consciousness raising mindset to really trigger the spirit of unhappiness, the spirit of discontent, so that women could see they're really being oppressed and they need to engage in what now we know as political activism, as Phyllis Chesler writes about it. Now, although we might not be meeting today as women in groups of 7 to 10, talking about how oppressed we are and standing up and discussing ditching the patriarchy. Now pause. What's the patriarchy? Patriarchy is male-led families, men who take responsibility to protect, provide, and lead, not to undermine or demean women, but men who are true men who are virtuous in doing so, especially within the family, which is the smallest cell and is the very heart of society. Now, although we may not have these consciousness-raising groups of second wave feminism, it's pretty normal today. I'm teaching Pilates. I'm a Pilates instructor. I taught for years. I can't tell you the number of clients who would go on and on about grievances they had with their husbands. For example, my husband can't even wash a dish. I can't leave him alone, or he won't eat anything but takeout, and he spends all our money. To which people will look at him and think, what a bunch of inequality these women are experiencing, this wife. He's such a loser. She's a victim. She's Superwoman doing it all, and she doesn't need him to thrive. You shouldn't stick with him. You should make him do his part. But the reality is that men and women are different. And she can make sacrifices. Maybe it might be the joy of cleaning for your husband. Oh dear, did I just say that? I'm not saying you need to be a slave, but sacrifices. Taking a lesser part, doing things that are sacrificial. Not that you're a doormat, but that we choose out of love to serve and take care of one another. And we see that the other is also serving and taking care of us. That role of sacrifice. Another example, one would say, my husband works long hours. I don't feel anything for him anymore. I'm no longer in love. I do everything for the kids, taking them to and fro. The advice from modern women would be, you're so oppressed. That's unfair. Leave him. Make him do 50-50. You see, this is the opposite of our Catholic worldview. The Catholic worldview, and one that's based in reality and human nature and faith in God, is that things can be out of kilter when marriages aren't working right. And that, for example, of the husband who works long hours, she doesn't feel any love for him anymore, and she does everything for the kids. Well, maybe they need more time together. Not saying that she stops motherhood, because I get really tired of people saying I need me time, but things help fill her up a little bit. Just those touch points throughout the day, here and there. Time together as spouses. And yes, I get it. I have 2 toddlers who have a lot of feelings. They can be terrorizing, but they can be so joyful. It's hard to find time to pull aside from their constant little needs and ever-changing schedules and seasons of development to find time to be with your spouse. I was just talking to a couple friends about this last week. One's a mom of 4 kids, 4 and under. Another has 3 kids who are in the thick of everything from toddlerhood to the early years of parochial school. And it can be hard as spouses to find any time together. It's even easy to say, oh, we'll just spend time together in 15 years when the kids are out of the house. And I actually push back. No, I think it's important that we're putting effort and time into that relationship with our spouse. That in the midst of everything going on, no matter what season in life you're in, that we don't just become 2 ships passing in the wind. That's actually become a little bit of a joke of my husband and I. We're just 2 ships passing in the wind. It's easy to become so, and it takes a lot of work to not be so. But the bottom line is, the whole idea is this: why are we breeding unhappy women? And how do we fix it? Well, I just mentioned a bunch of grievances, and people say, just divorce him. She's oppressed. He's a loser. But the reality is that all of this is consciousness raising. And it's the opposite of a Christian worldview of reconciliation in the face of difficult circumstances, recognizing that other person might not be in the place we hope they might be, but that we can still love them in the face of that and continue to stand firm, faithfully and sacrificially in our roles. Sacrificially is key. And that there's reunification that we're ultimately hoping and praying and working toward, and looking at our part in how things are going wrong and trying to do the best we can, because that's really all we can control. I think part of this is that women need other women to support each other, to see that the things that you're going through, whether it's sleepless nights, terrible teenagers, wayward adult children, whatever it might be, we need to hear others are going through similar things. In the midst of that, not to point and blame, not to look at yourself as a miserable human being, but to look at, this is just part of human nature, part of seasons of life. But instead, we don't have that. We have this, what is referred to as what used to be an intentional type of group, consciousness raising groups of second wave feminism, where you look at how you're the victim and you've been oppressed and you're the one who's hurt, and so you need to get involved in political activism. Well, the reason that your children are all messed up is because you shouldn't have had children, so you should advocate for abortion and contraception. The reason why you're struggling and suffering in the season you're in is because you were a stay-at-home mom for those years, and now you've just given everything and you feel miserable, and so you've been oppressed. Like, this idea is women who actually have been objectively happy in the seasons of life they're in are being convinced by other people that they shouldn't be, that they should be dissatisfied, and they should quit. And I think this is part of the reason why there are a lot of women leaving their marriages today. I can think of multiple people I know right now, women who say, I just don't love you anymore and I want to go get a job. Because they're told, be dissatisfied. Women who I know, objectively speaking, who are very happy and content raising their children, fighting for their faith, fighting for their souls, and who just quit. You see, the devil's in the details, and it's in a strategy that is a feminist strategy that dates back, and there's documentation of it well into the latter half of the 19th century. So here's, I think, the remedy. The remedy is we have to be aware of groupthink that says that I'm an oppressed, men are terrible. We have to get rid of the idea that I can do anything men can do better. And don't tell me you're not guilty of this as a woman, because I know I am too. It's just there. And not that it's done sometimes intentionally, but it's just that it's all around us. Passed on, whether it's from the workplace generation to generation, social media, the movies, the books, the magazines that are consumed, all the content. What we need as women is, number one, the sacrament of confession to help keep us accountable, and to be forgiven, and to be fueled and forged in sanctifying grace. See, this is why we do need other women, but we need to be choosy in seeking the advice and sharing with others. People who have a similar worldview. It might be a little more intergenerational. People who are 10, 30, 40 years your senior. Maybe there's a couple who's thriving in a similar place for the same things, And maybe they're even 10 years younger. Invite people over. Have those couples interactions with other families who are striving. Because I think this is a huge answer to that crisis of why are we breeding unhappy women? Because we don't have good examples, good companionship, good ideas, good advisors, good people who will just listen and not tell you to divorce your husband, make him do 50-50, or breed any animosity that's already growing in your heart over the things that are just out of kilter that happen in the home.
Like what you just heard? Share it with your family and friends. And thanks for listening.